All right, this is the Voice of Motown podcast. I'm Tyler Pepe.
And I'm Braden Cork, and this is the WVU Sports Podcast by two suffering WVU fans.
Hey guys, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Voice of Motown Podcast. We're trying to get those numbers up, so we would greatly appreciate the support. And there's just so much to talk about tonight. WVU parting ways with Shane Lyons, WVU's win over Oklahoma, and of course, Garrett Greene's performance in that game. We'll discuss Neal Brown and Jordan Lesley. Are they off the hot seat? Are they still on it? The K-State game this Saturday, and then we'll finish it off with some WVU basketball. So we'll start off, of course, with the firing of Shane Lyons. That news broke today. And Brandon, I'll let you start us off.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I was kind of shocked that it came without any sort of really murmurings. I know before the game, ESPN was reporting that both Shane Lyons and Neal Brown jobs were on the line based on, different discussions that they had. But all the indications and all the rumors and everything else seemed to indicate that, Neal Brown's job was on the line, but Shane Lyons wasn't really in the crosshairs. Now, I think a lot of fans kind of expected him to be after that extension. But, I think if you kind of look at the way this season has went and the way that he has handled Neal Brown and some of the things that I've read today about how he's handled the basketball program, it all kind of makes sense. And honestly, I think this is the best bet for WVU moving forward. The key thing is, in my opinion, is finding someone fast.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. And of course, a lot of fans are happy with this move. And I'll admit, I'm one of them. And I do like it because if Neal Brown is let go at the end of the year, or if he's let go next year, of course, we want a new AD to pick a new head coach, because if Shane Lyons is still there and hires the next head coach, that means Shane Lyons is going to be here for a very long time. And as you were just alluding to, I feel like his tenure here is a little spotty, so I'm okay with us letting him go. And of course, it all goes back to that extension. I don't think anybody is faulting Shane Lyons for hiring Neal Brown to begin with. I know I've seen people online saying they didn't like the hiring even from the beginning, and I believe them. I'm not saying they're lying. However, I think that was an opinion that was in the minority. I feel like most people were okay when Neal Brown got hired here at West Virginia. He was coming off of a fantastic run at Troy. I think he was 3-0 in bowl games while he was there. His resume was not bad. What ruined Shane Lyons' tenure, again, was that extension prior to the 2021 season. At that time, Neal was only 11-11 at West Virginia, and he was signed prior to that extension until the 2024 season. So it seemed a little unnecessary. I've heard guys like Tony Caridi, Coach Hunter on Sportsline. They said that, the AD in that situation has to extend a coach, because otherwise other programs will use it against West Virginia when they're recruiting people. They'll say that coach isn't even going to be there for your whole 4 years. So I kind of get that. However, the problem wasn't so much the extension, it was the amount and the guaranteed money. Obviously, $4 million a year is not too bad, but I feel like if Shane Lyons was a better businessman, he could have figured out a way for that contract not to be fully guaranteed, which is our biggest issue with the contract right now.
Yeah, and I think, in a vacuum, I don't think the contract extension, as bad as it was, is something that is necessarily fireable on its own. I think it's a culmination of different things. I think if you recognize that was a bad extension, then you own it and you rally the troops to get that buyout in place, and you make the decision at the appropriate time. It seems like as this season has dragged on, he has continued to give Neal Brown a longer and longer leash. I've also read today that under his tenure, the MAC donations have dropped significantly just because people either don't like him or he's not spending enough time trying to get that money in, which also hurts with that buyout. So, while the contract is bad on its own, it's just a kind of avalanche of things that are snowballing downhill for him that are catching up with him, because he's not doing the right things and putting West Virginia's interest, um, as first priority. It seems like he's more trying to cover his own back throughout this past year or so, as opposed to saying, I screwed up, I made the mistake, I'll fix it. And if you're, that's the type of person you want in the AD office, though. You want someone who's willing to own it and make that pivot. I mean, I think you even saw it in some ways with Oliver Luck, where he kind of realized that the head coach in waiting thing probably didn't work out best. He gave too much control to Dana Holgerson. He helped him, get the right people in place, get Joe DeForest out of there, all those other sorts of things. And it helped. I mean, it helped Holgerson out a lot. Obviously, Holgerson wasn't perfect, but it takes a really great AD who's able to do that. And I think it's going to be crucial for WVU to hire someone who is either has some experience or really has, a different way of thinking as the new AD. And there's some really interesting names that are being floated around. I know, just off the top of my head, you have Whit Babcock, who's at Virginia Tech, Rob Mullins, Oliver Luck again, Kelly Zinn, who was the associate athletic director and is now at LSU in the same role. But of those names, I don't really like Whit Babcock just because it doesn't seem like VT's really doing much. But Oliver Luck and Rob Mullins are two guys that would entice me on if they were brought in, just because Mullins has a tremendous tenure at Oregon. He's a West Virginia native, graduated from here, and Oliver Luck really helped us get into the Big 12 and did a lot of great things whenever it was a tumultuous time here at WVU. So there may be more names that come out of the woodwork, but those are the top four right now that a lot of people are talking about.
Yeah, I've heard those names get floated around, and it will be interesting to see what happens in the next week or two, because I'm sure by the next time we record, there's going to be even more rumors floating around about who could be the replacement. And I will be interested to hear who it is, because once we know who it is, then we can start debating whether Neal Brown's going to get another year, whether that person's going to want to bring in their own head coach, which most ADs do nowadays. That just seems to be how it works. So stay tuned, guys. There's going to be a lot of interesting things happening in Morgantown in the next couple of weeks.
For sure.
Yeah. All right, guys. But to some really good news that happened over the weekend. West Virginia's first win over Oklahoma since joining the Big 12. The Mountaineers won 23-20 with a walk-off field goal from the ever-consistent Casey Legg. This was a fun game to attend. Brandon and myself were both there. We enjoyed every minute of it, even in the rain. It helps when you win to sit through that. But possibly just as exciting as the victory was seeing the emergence of quarterback Garrett Greene. The Mountaineers, they don't win that game without his terrific performance. I don't even think you can debate that. So what are your thoughts on the exciting victory?
Yeah, I mean, the first half was extremely rough to watch. I know, just sitting in the stands, kind of, it felt like people were unmotivated for WVU. The fans were, I mean, if you look at the fans at the beginning of the game versus the fans that stayed after halftime, I mean, the stadium was almost half full after halftime, which was kind of sad. I mean, obviously the weather plays into that a little bit, but you could kind of feel the energy being drained. And I feel like when Garrett Greene went in there and just provided a spark with his legs, I mean, maybe he wasn't necessarily doing what Neal Brown wanted him to do as far as play design is concerned, but he came in there and he made plays. He moved the ball. He figured out ways to counter what Oklahoma was trying to throw at us defensively. And, he ended up accounting for 3 touchdowns, which is huge. And that was really the difference in the game, because in the first half with JT Daniels out there in the offense that we've seen for the past, 7 or 8 weeks or so, it just wasn't working. And Oklahoma knew what was coming, and JT Daniels was off again. I know there were several passes where the ball just sailed on him. So, I don't know if it's necessarily a condemnation of JT Daniels. It may be an injury, maybe he's checked out, but Garrett Greene was really the hero and the MVP of the game easily on Saturday.
Yeah, 100%. First off, before we gush all over Garrett Greene's performance, hats off to the defense. Um, they have just had, I would say, about 10 straight really good quarters, which I don't think we had ever thought of saying that watching their performance in the first half of this season. But the quarters, you certainly can't blame our defense for anything that has happened. And that's pretty amazing. It just proves that yards don't mean anything, because Gray for Oklahoma had 211 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, and averaged almost 8.5 yards a carry. However, the defense Oklahoma is 20 points. So, I mean, all those yards don't mean much if you're not. And hats off to Neal Brown. We credit him a lot, but he had a gutsy fake punt call where, it didn't even look like it was going to work, but Sam James made a heck of a play. So hats off to the defense and Neal Brown. But like you were saying, the hero of this game, the story of the game, is Garrett Greene. He had 138 passing yards, 119 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns, and was sacked 0 times. Just to show how important his performance was, team doesn't even eclipse 100 rushing yards without his rushing stats. And they ended with over 200 rushing yards as a team. It just shows how important his one individual performance was. And yeah, unfortunately, JT just did it again. 7 for 12, 6 yards. And a lot of yards, about half of them came on one play. Interception, was sacked twice. The offense has just been lifeless with him in there. And just to compare him with Greene, Garrett Greene had as many passing yards in just a little over 2 quarters as Daniels has had in the last 6 quarters that he's been on the football field. I think Daniels only has like 10 more yards than Greene has over that time. So that's kind of crazy when you see that on paper. But the quarterback situation shouldn't even be in question. So what do you think about that? Because Neal Brown's comments in the press conference were, obviously, I think he's just bluffing, but he basically said that he was going to JT and Garrett out there next game. I think he's just saying that to make K-State game plan for both. At least that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, I mean, and even in the post-game press conference, he was very kind of praiseworthy, if that's the right word, for Garrett too. And it's just a strange situation, but we'll talk about that I think a little bit later. But with Garrett, I think what he brings to the table is that dynamic running ability and the ability to improvise whenever a play is breaking down. And we've talked about this numerous times before. West Virginia's receivers just aren't getting separation, and we do run kind of a lot of the same routes and concepts over and over again. And defenses can kind of key in on that. On top of that, our running game isn't going so hot. I mean, right now it's Justin Johnson and a whole bunch of guys who haven't really played yet. And I think it's a little unfair to kind of give Justin Johnson or put it all on Justin Johnson for why the run game is not working. I mean, it's just a combination of things with that. But, with Garrett, I feel like, he's able to create plays even when the defense is doing what it's trying to do. And that's something that JT Daniels just couldn't do. And that's, again, no slight on JT. I still think he's a good quarterback, but I think the past few weeks we've seen that something's going on with him. If you had to put two in a vacuum, where you say, would you rather have Garrett Greene at full health, knowing what he can do, versus JT Daniels at full health, in the right mindset, who would you take? I'd probably take JT Daniels, because I think talent-wise, the way that he thinks about the game, he's probably a better quarterback. But I think when you throw in the variables, which are the offense that we run, the coaching staff, the questionable health, and, I guess how checked in JT Daniels is, Garrett Greene's just the right guy to have out there. And it's kind of frustrating to see that he hasn't earned the right to start next game, given that JT hasn't really earned it. And it's also kind of frustrating that after that, second half touchdown or first half touchdown drive that Garrett Greene led, against Oklahoma, they still trotted out JT Daniels to start at the second quarter. It seemed like regardless of what Garrett did, he really had to make no doubt that he should be out there over JT Daniels in that Oklahoma game. And I think as a fan, that was super frustrating because, 30,000 people or whatever was left in the stadium saw that Garrett Greene was moving the offense and JT Daniels just couldn't get it done. And regardless of who the best talent is when healthy, whenever all variables are removed, during game time, you have to play the guy who's working. And Garrett was that guy.
Yeah, to be fair, once Garrett Greene scored, he played the rest of the game, but he did come out and have a drive, which I wanted to talk about here in a second. But going to JT, I do feel bad for JT. And if he's hurt, that's unfortunate. He's had injury problems his whole career. It's well documented. But whether he's healthy or hurt, you can't deny it. He has negatively impacted this football team, and Neal needs to hand the offense over to someone else. It shouldn't have taken long to realize this. JT has looked off to me ever since the Townsend game. Just hasn't looked himself. Bad placement, bad decisions. And if you're a quarterback who relies primarily on his passing skills, because we all know JT is not a runner, then those are problems you just can't mask because you're just a pocket passer. So I don't believe he should have been pulled early this season, obviously. I mean, the Pitt loss wasn't his fault. The Kansas loss wasn't his fault. So I don't feel like I'm being unreasonable, but his performances against Texas, Baylor, TCU, they were okay. They weren't great, but they weren't terrible. But without question, JT should not have played in the second half against Iowa State. You could tell he just wasn't getting out of that funk. Neal Brown makes $4 million a year to make these decisions. That Iowa State game was winnable, I thought, in the second half. It was a 3-point game to start the third quarter. And instead of, possibly sitting at 5-5 right now, say they put Greene in that second half, rally to win. Now they're sitting at 4-6, and it looks very unlikely to make a bowl game. And that's because of Neal's reluctance to bench starters. He just doesn't do it very often. And, he didn't even want to leave Greene in. You just alluded to it. Greene had the best drive for WVU's offense up to that point when he first put Greene in. He went like 50 yards, and they had to punt from Oklahoma's 40. Not a bad drive. We won the field position battle there. And then he puts JT right back in the next drive. And then I think JT goes, and then he goes 3 and out. I'm pretty sure, if memory serves correct. It just made no sense. And then once he put Greene in, we score right before the half. Plus Greene fits. Here's the thing. Greene fits Neal's philosophy better than JT does. That's why I don't understand why he's so reluctant to play him. Neal wants to control time of possession. He wants these long, drawn-out drives. And that's an offense that normally runs a lot. Well, if you got Garrett Greene out there, you are running the ball more than passing it. It seems like most of the time when they have JT out there, they want to pass more than run. It doesn't even fit Neal's philosophy. So I don't understand why he's been so reluctant to just give Greene a run these past 2 years.
Yeah, honestly, I think it has to do with kind of how he is as a coach and as a person. I think he's kind of a control freak. I think if you look at the things that he complains about with Garrett Greene, it's that Garrett doesn't do what Neal Brown wants the offense to do on that play. So if, it's supposed to be a slant route on the first read and the second read is an in route or something, you make one of those 2 reads. It seems like, Greene, he just kind of makes a read, and if he doesn't like what he sees, he runs. And until defenses stop that, I think that's perfectly feasible, especially when the calls that you're playing aren't working. And we've seen it too with kind of his player selection, especially when he prefers to play some of these super seniors, the transfers that have come in from FC and whatnot, over some of these younger guys. From a talent perspective, some of these younger guys may be better performers, but he can trust these older seniors are going to do what he's expecting them to do. And you can see which players he's choosing to play. It's the ones that he can trust, the ones that he knows are going to play within his system, within his walls. And if they don't play within his walls, then he's going to single them out. He's going to call them out. He's not going to put them on the field. He's going to put them in his doghouse. And, you just have to play by Neal's rules. And I don't think that's a winning head coach thing. I mean, good head coaches scheme to get their best players in successful positions. And Neal Brown just gets in all of his players' way.
I think you nailed it. And I think that's a good way of putting it. He is kind of hurting their performance because he's not letting athletes just go out there and be athletes. He just wants a bunch of like average players to just run the playbook, which, hey, if that's been working, I'm all for it. But the thing is, we've had 3 years of horrible offense, and then we had this year, which for the most part, the offense has been good, but we've also had just horrible performances like against Iowa State and Texas Tech. So it's not consistent. And you're absolutely right. It seems like Neal Brown would rather Greene throw a 6-yard stop route than to scramble out of a broken play and pick up 15 yards, just because that's what Neal Brown drew up. And I don't know. He just does seem like a control freak. I think you nailed it. But you mentioned it earlier. I think it's worth discussing Neal Brown's strange treatment of Garrett Greene. For whatever reason, Neal seems very hesitant to not only, not play Garrett, but to even praise him. We can go back to the Townsend game. Neal praised every single quarterback after that game besides Garrett. He had nice things to say about JT, Goose, and Nico, and he didn't say one good thing about Garrett, even though all 4 quarterbacks had a pretty nice day. Then after Garrett Greene puts on the performance he did against Oklahoma, I mean, you should be gushing over a performance like that. He basically said, yeah, Garrett had a nice performance, but he made mistakes. Like, for whatever reason, Garrett Greene cannot get in his good graces, and it does seem odd. It does seem like he treats him differently than everyone else, and I don't know why. I don't get it. Garrett Greene had all 3 WVU touchdowns that game. And he just won't give Garrett his due. Am I imagining this? Does the audience notice this? I know you notice it, Brandon. What's going on with it?
Yeah. It's really strange. I mean, especially when, I don't know if it's something, maybe it's a coaching thing that he notices with Greene, that he plays better whenever he doesn't give him praise. I don't know if that's it, but I mean, it feels like a good way to either, run someone out of town or just beat them down until they don't want to be a quarterback anymore. Maybe that's the plan, is, get him to, encouraged to move to like another position. But he's still second on the depth chart, and he's obviously there for a reason. And whether that's Graham Harrell who's putting him there or someone else, and Neal's kind of stuck with putting him there. So I don't know why he's so critical of him. I don't know why he's trying to change him. I mean, I think Garrett can be successful doing what he does. Now, is it necessarily is he necessarily a quarterback who's going to go out there and win you, 10 or 11 games playing that style whenever teams can game plan for it and, try to take that away and make him play within more structure? We don't know. But again, we haven't seen that. Teams haven't really been able to game plan for it. And this goes back to last year when Deggy was just awful. Maybe if Garrett Greene would have played more then, we would have known, hey, whenever teams are able to scheme for Garrett Greene, what else can he do? And then how can he grow from that? Because right now we just know that he's a great runner, and that's all we'll ever know him for, just because of the way that they play him. And the first time that he struggles because teams figure out a way to take away his strength, which is his athleticism, WVU fans are probably going to come down on him pretty hard and call for Nico or Crowder or whatever not. But it's not necessarily fair to him because he never really had the chance to make those mistakes. And that's on Neal Brown. And, he's criticizing him for doing what he does best and not giving him opportunities to do the things that Neal wants him to do.
Yeah. And by all accounts, from reporters, from players, these past 2 seasons, everyone has just praised Garrett for being a fantastic teammate, never complaining about these quarterback situations. From what I heard, him and Daggy got along in the locker room. Seems like him and JT get along in the locker room. So it's not like he's a bad teammate and that's rubbing Neal the wrong way. By all accounts, it seems like he works hard and he just does whatever is expected of him. So it's just really head scratching why he gets different treatment. At least that's what it seems like on the outside looking in. But
Yeah.
after, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, the only other thing I can think of in regards to the situation is, I remember before JT Daniels came to West Virginia or even committed to West Virginia, when they were talking in spring about the QB battle, Neal Brown would just always harp on how he needs to be more careful with the ball and how he needs to make better decisions to protect the ball more. But I get that, but you got to let him play in the way that he's most comfortable. And I think he was trying to box in someone who has a special talent. And it's kind of like a battle of wits is, who's going to win, the one who's trying to build the box, or Garrett, who's trying to do what he does best and just live free. So right now, I think with the pressure that Neal's facing, he's going to have to let him out and, live and die by what Garrett does out there. And if he doesn't work out because he didn't get the reps that he need to develop anything else other than his running ability, then that's on him. I mean, you can't really put any, this is kind of like a disclaimer for any upcoming game that Garrett plays in. If he does have a bad game, you can't criticize him and say, well, he's not the quarterback of the future, we're done with him, Neal was right. You have to put this squarely on Neal, again, the coaches who didn't give him the reps he needed or the confidence that he needed, or develop him in the way that he needed to develop in order to be more than just a runner, because that day is going to come. So just trying to get ahead of it here, because I do believe in Garrett Greene. I do think that he could be a solid quarterback for us in the future. But again, it's just something you have to give a chance on him, and the coaching staff has not yet done that.
Yeah, and these last two games will tell us a lot about all these questions, which it makes me really look forward to Saturday. And I hope Neal makes the right decision, because if he just trots out the same unit that's been playing all year, that's not going to really tell us a lot. And I get it, Neal Brown's playing for that bowl game, possibly for his job, but he's got to switch it up, as we saw last week. He switched it up and it worked, which all leads us to this. After a very solid win against Oklahoma, is Neal Brown still on the hot seat? What do you think?
Yes. I mean, it's the worst Oklahoma team that we have seen in at least 10 years, maybe 20 years. We were at home. This was the perfect situation for us to get that win. And we really had to do everything that Neal Brown does not want us to do offensively in order to win the game. So this wasn't a win because of Neal Brown. I think it was a win in spite of Neal Brown. Without kind of rewatching the game, it seemed like the players played harder when Greene was out there. There was, a little bit more pep in your step because the ball was moving and that frustration was a little bit washed away. And even if Neal somehow does manage to win out and get into a bowl game, I still don't think that's him another year. Again, it's still year 4. He still had the Neal Brown certified no-show games multiple times this year on the road. He still hasn't shown the ability to develop players. He's still surrounding himself with yes men. And he had the opportunity this offseason to, not only with the Graham Harrell hire, but go in there and make changes across the board to get people in there with differing voices to make him a better coach and make the players better. And he chose not to do that. He chose to stick with his buddies. And, regardless of what anyone thinks out there, I don't think an AD is going to come in, kind of look at the past 4 years, look at the coaching staffs, look at the starters that he's chosen, look at how poorly he's underperformed, and then flip the page over and see the recruiting classes he's brought in and say, okay, well, I see the reason to keep him. I have a feeling that, the AD, because the AD is going to have some sort of personality, is going to say, okay, this is a perfect reason to let him go. I don't even need to talk to him. He's gone. And I don't think anyone should be outraged by that, because Neal has earned that. Neal has earned his job being on the hot seat, and Neal has earned to be released into the free agency and see where he ends up next.
I'm with you. Yeah, he's still on the hot seat, obviously. I mean, this is a 5-5 Oklahoma team. This isn't the Oklahomas of yesteryear. So yeah, it was an exciting win, but remember, we got really excited after the Baylor win too, and then he rips off 3 straight losing games and 2 horrible performances against Tech and Iowa State. So let's not get too excited. Now, if he wins out, makes it to a bowl game and plays well, the team plays well in the bowl game, I could see Neal buying himself another year, and there would be an argument for it then. but that's saying a lot. Well, I mean, we'll see what happens Saturday and the week after. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and
I
I
still
don't.
think he's on the hot seat for sure. I could see if he wins out, goes 7-6. I could see a new AD saying, "All right, I'll give you next year, see what happens." But anything less than that, yeah, I think a new AD is gonna say, I want to bring in my own guy, and I'll roll the dice with the guy I pick.
Yeah, and I think, for the fans who like myself are just sick of Neal Brown and kind of feel like regardless of what he does and what he finishes out with, because even if he does finish in 7-6, I'm done with him. I mean, I'm not going to be amped up for the WVU season knowing Neal Brown's going to trot across the field leading us out against Penn State to get slaughtered. Um, but, I think it's important to continue voicing your opinions about Neal Brown on social media so that any new athletic director sees it, and make sure that they're aware and, that you don't want Neal Brown because this is the time to do it. It's not necessarily whenever, you don't go out there and make a scene when Neal's on the field, but, you make sure that your voice is heard at the games or you're not necessarily at the games, but like, on Twitter or whatever, because I think we've seen what Neal Brown is going to do here and what he's willing to do. And we've kind of seen his true colors come out a little bit more during these past 4 or 5 weeks where, you can tell his tones change. You can tell the things that he said, um, again, with Garrett Greene, but also the things about the negativity on Twitter and how it's affecting his recruiting, which isn't true at all. The performance on the field is what's affecting recruiting. And he can, tell himself whatever he needs to sleep well at night, but he needs to keep it in between his own 4 walls instead of putting it out there for the public to hear because it's just going to divide us and it shouldn't be dividing us. I think that statement right there is kind of another thing that kind of pushed me way over the edge with Neal is just, you got to stop misplacing blame. You got to take the blame and you got to fix it. And over 4 years, he hasn't shown the ability to do it. So unless Neal Brown somehow, some way figures out a way to get the top 25, high school kids to walk on campus next year and say, okay, this is our team. We're going to win with the best talent in the nation. Then, there's no reason to bring them back. If you want to be a great recruiter, then be a great recruiter and bring in the top talent. But that's never going to happen at WVU. So we shouldn't even entertain it.
Yeah, the biggest thing you want to see in a head coach is accountability. So when he's
Mm-hmm.
starting to point the fingers and blame other people for why stuff's happening, I mean, instantly you're going to lose your audience. So yeah, that's definitely the wrong move for him to make. And really the last question I wanted to ask you about all of this Neal Brown talk is defensive coordinator Jordan Lesley has had some really solid performances lately. His defense played well in the second half against TCU. They played well against Iowa State for almost the entire game until WVU's lack of offense just finally caught up with them. And they against. So here's my question. If for whatever reason Neal Brown's coming back next year with this new AD, maybe they're giving him one more year. Do you bring Lesley back since he's really closing out the year solid? And if you do bring Jordan Lesley back, that means you're not changes on the coaching staff. And if you're just coming back with the same coaching staff next year, can you really improve that much? So it's a 2-parter. Would you bring Lesley back if he continues, and just a recipe for disaster because then nothing changes?
I wouldn't, just because I think Leslie's too close to Neal Brown. Now, if we brought in another head coach and they wanted to bring back Jordan Lesley, I'd be all for it. But, I feel like between Neal Brown and a lot of the people on his staff, Jordan Lesley, Shadon Brown, Sean Reagan, etc. He just has a bunch of guys or Matt Moore is another one who he's really close with, who's worked for a long time. And whenever you work with someone for such a long time, you especially in kind of in a subordinate role, you kind of just, can submit to them in certain things. And I feel like Jordan Lesley, I think you can kind of tell at the beginning of the season where, he wasn't doing what he was doing in years past. And I'm not exactly sure if that was his choice or if Neal was kind of chiming in on the game planning with it. But after the success that we had against TCU, where we were blitzing more, we started, doing better defensively, and Lesley started kind of changing his defensive scheme. So I don't know if it was just, Neal kind of saying this is working so you can do what you want now, or what it was. But I think that keeping Neal Brown and Jordan Lesley together is something that I don't think is good for either party. I think if you let Jordan Lesley coach how he wants to without kind of any input from anyone else, that's where I would feel the most confident in having him as defense coordinator. Because I do think he's a smart defensive coordinator. I do think that he's a good coach. But just from what I've seen with Neal over the past 4 years, I just think that he rubs off on people and makes them worse, whether it's players or other coaches or whatnot. It's just a giant shadow that looms over an entire program. And I don't know if that's necessarily the way he wants to run it, or if that's just because he's failing and he doesn't know any other way to fix the situation than to try to grab for more control. So, short answer is no. And if they do bring him back in that capacity, to the same point that I said, it's not going to go well, just because I think Neal, if they would bring him back, needs detractors, someone who's going to challenge him and honestly make him better. That's the only way you get better, is if someone tells you that you did something wrong and tells you how to fix it, or gives you a differing opinion. If you just sit in an echo chamber all the time, you're never going to think that you're wrong. And I think Neal right now, with the staff that he's chosen, is in kind of an echo chamber.
I think I'm the exact opposite. I say if Brown comes back, I be open to a Jordan Lesley return if he keeps this up. I mean, he's still got 2 more games. If they get in these an agreement, he has to go. But if they bring in a head coach, I don't know if I would be real open about Jordan Lesley still being here. I think I would want new, fresh from everything. Maybe I'd be open to Graham Harrell, but I think I would want a new defensive coordinator with a new head coach. But you're really, it seems like Jordan Lesley has a philosophy worked. I mean, if you send pressure, get pressure, his quarterback, WVU's defense has a solid day. But for whatever reason, several games where he's just cushioning these receivers 5-10 yards, no contact, and gets eaten up. And then the next game, you see him blitz more aggressive. Obviously, you change game plans for opponents. It just doesn't make sense. You even see this on the offensive side of the ball. With JT Daniels in there, you hardly see any motion in our offense. For whatever reason, as soon as Garrett Greene was in the second half, there was motion all over the place. With JT there, I mean, you don't have to be running options motion. I'm kind of with you. Is this all Neal Brown's doing? Not wanting a lot of motion, not wanting a lot of blitzing on defense, or are these coordinators Jekyll and Hyde? Like, I don't understand how it's right there, it's working, but then they switch their philosophy, the next series. And I think this all goes back to what we were putting out there on social media. Saturday, to me, WVU has had the players to win ball games. So I think you can get rid of the excuse that, the players aren't just good enough. The coaching's fine, but the players just simply aren't good enough. I think that's out the window after Saturday. I think the coaching staff has let these players down by just setting them to fail a lot of the time. This team, the one I saw on Saturday, should have easily won 6 or 7 games this year. And that's not even saying a lot. That's 500. The coaching staff, I think, just put their players in positions to fail a lot of the time this year.
Yeah. I mean, there's no other way to kind of explain it. I mean, I think if you look at from offensive line, bringing back 5 starters, bringing in a veteran quarterback, having one of the deepest running back rooms that we've had in a long time, having two receivers on the outside who are capable of winning 50-50 balls, one of them being a sophomore who has the athletic ability to kind of do anything and allows you to kind of open up the playbook in ways that we haven't seen since maybe like Kevin White. And having Sam James, who's a 5th-year senior who can really get vertical and may not have the greatest hands, but can really stretch the field and give you opportunities there. offensively, we should have been averaging 30 points a game like we had been early in the season. And there's really no reason for that other than kind of coaches holding us back. I mean, all the ingredients offensively added up to something that we could have a really, really productive offense. I mean, similar to, you know, the Will Greer senior year, where I think we have a similar amount of talent as that team does. I mean, maybe we don't have a David Sills, but who knows what Bryce Ford Wheaton or Caden Prather could have done in that Dana Holgerson offense. Maybe those guys would have been as good or not better than David Sills because athletically, I think they're probably superior. You know, and then you look at the defense, obviously not the greatest unit in the back end, but we have a really, really deep linebacking core. And to your point, you know, Jordan Lesley has always been great at, you know, kind of playing tight, blitzing, taking away space from the offense. And it's been super successful for him in the past years. And this year we just stopped doing that. And I get not having Charles Woods hurts a lot, but, you know, just doing a complete 180 on his normal play style, you know, it just doesn't make sense. And, you know, I said at the beginning of the season, 7 wins was kind of my floor. And, you know, it just seems like there were ways that coaches could have came in here and got us to 7 wins without even, you know, breaking a sweat. And it's taken, I mean, we could still hit 7 wins if we went out and win a bowl, but I mean, it's been extremely stressful and hard to watch at times. And I think that's the big difference between Neal Brown is if he does get the 7 wins, are those 7 wins and the 6 losses that he got equal to the way that someone else would have done it? And I think even if he does somehow luck his way into 7-6, the way he's lost those 6 games and the way he's won those 7 are really important to take into your decision on whether you want to keep Neal Brown or not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if he could knock off a number 19 this Saturday, that would go a long way. Because if you look at we got 4 wins this year. I mean, none of the teams are impressive. You got Townsend, Virginia Tech, who's under 500. I forget what Baylor's record is, but it's right around 500. And Oklahoma is 500. So no,
I think they're 6
signature wins. Who? Baylor? They're 6-4.
I think they're 6-3.
3. They've only played 9 games. They just got shellacked last week by the team we're about to talk about. But you brought up Charles Woods. I think this is worth mentioning. Do you know how many games Charles Woods has played in so far this year?
4,
which is the max you can play and still get redshirted. And if you noticed why he was out this past week, it was due to an illness and the leg injury still lingering. So, or the ankle, whatever it was. So I wonder if they sit him out these next 2 games so that Charles Woods can come back next year. Because as we know, much like JT Daniels, Charles Woods wants to go to the NFL, and he hasn't really been able to show off this year. So maybe he's coming back next year to really up his draft stock. So that's something to look out for. So what is Baylor?
6-4.
6-4. So there you go. We've beaten one team with a winning record. And by the end of the year, they could be under 500. So we'll see. But yeah, we'll end this bitch session here because, I mean, that's all the stuff we really did need to vent about. I mean, there's just a lot of things to question right now. But with the firing of Shane Lyons, it seems like maybe this program is moving in the right direction. But let's look towards Saturday. And for this segment, I'm going to lean heavily on Brandon. I normally do a lot of research prior to these podcasts. But just to break down the wall a little bit for the audience, my grandmother passed away today, so I didn't get a ton of time to do research. Rest in peace, Graham. Love you, miss you. But I apologize to the listeners in advance. I didn't get a ton of info on K-State, but so I'll defer to Brandon a lot. Let's get into it. West Virginia takes on 19th ranked Kansas State this Saturday. The last time I looked, the Mountaineers are 7.5-point underdogs at home, which isn't surprising. K-State is 7-3. WVU is just 4-6. But this is a game WVU needs to win to be bowl eligible. So what are your thoughts on the game?
You know, I definitely think this is a really bad matchup for WVU because K-State is a team that just plays really good, sound football. They will beat you if you make mistakes, and that's kind of always been K-State's MO. You know, they play smart, they play efficient, they're not going to shoot themselves in the foot, and they're really well coached. And that hasn't changed in the transition from Snyder to Kleeman. And obviously, Kleeman had great success whenever he was at, what was it, North Dakota or South Dakota? One of the directional Dakotas.
North Dakota.
North Dakota, and he had a lot of success there. So this program is no different. And while they will be without Adrian Martinez, who has been really good for them this year, they still are going to have a really quality player at quarterback for them in Will Howard, who we'll talk about here in a little bit. So this is a game that, I think, just like last year, WVU had the opportunity to hang in there with them and have a chance to win, but mistakes and lack of discipline really shot them in the foot. And even though that we will be in Morgantown for this game, I really don't see that outcome being too much different because K-State's one of those teams that travels well. K-State only has actually, they have no losses on the road this year. They have won all of their road games, which is very impressive, considering they lost to Tulane at home, but they have beaten everyone else on the road. So, this is going to be a game where WVU's going to have to go out there and play close to perfect, because if you go out there and you start slow, if you start off like you did against Oklahoma, where your offense is just sputtering, K-State's offense isn't going to sputter. They're going to produce points. And if you have to wait till the late second quarter to get your first touchdown, you might already be down 2 or 3 scores. So that's my thoughts at a high level. Do you want to dig into the offense?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, K-State's on a roll. They just thumped Baylor last week, 31-3. And Adrian Martinez got hurt early in that contest, so that could have been an easy one that they let get close or maybe even lost. But no, they won by 28 points. Junior Will Howard came in, and he had a huge game, passing nearly 200 yards, which, isn't super impressive, but he had 3 touchdowns. And, of course, they have Deuce Vaughn, who put a beating on WVU last year, and he's already got over 1,000 rushing yards. He's used heavily in their passing game, and I'm sure we'll see a healthy dose of him Saturday. He has averaged 22 carries per game over these last 3 games. So I wouldn't be shocked if, he's somewhere up in the 20s as well against WVU. And I think that's why they travel so well. They just have a philosophy that does travel well. You run the ball good, you take care of the ball, you play tight defense, and really that works in any weather and in any environment. So it will be interesting. What I didn't get to do a lot is dive into their defense. But just on the surface, looking at where they're ranked, their defense is incredible. They don't allow a lot of points. And like we talked about earlier, Oklahoma versus Garrett Greene with no film study. K-State, without a doubt, is going to prepare for Garrett Greene to be in there, bare minimum, half this game, if not from start to finish. And so it'll be interesting to see how Garrett Greene can succeed, not only against a good defense, but a defense that's going to be ready for him.
Yeah, and this defense is really, really good. And it's not good in the way where it's just dominant because they have a whole bunch of great players. They just play really well as a unit. They have right now 3 games so far this year where they have allowed more than 30 points. In those contests, they are 1-2. The only game that they won was against Oklahoma, but in every other contest, they have held teams under 30 points. The only other team that came close was Texas Tech, who scored 28. And K-State beat them by 9. So this is, K-State is going to make your life difficult on defense. And part of that is around their secondary. They have 3 really quality guys back there, 2 good corners and a safety who have really good coverage grades on PFF. And they also have, I'm going to butcher this name, Felix Enudike Uzoma. I know we said this last year because he was great last year and he is great again this year. I'm just going to say Uzoma from here on out. That way you guys know. But he has 34 total pressures, 7 sacks this year, picking up where he left off last year. And I have seen some mock draft experts say he is a first-round draft pick or a second-round draft pick. He is a very, very good athlete, and he is someone who could give you real fits there. So when you combine someone like him, who is just a terror in the pass rush with a really good secondary, you're really able to neutralize some Big 12 offenses. And we've seen that so far this season with the way that you combine people who are good in coverage with someone who can wreak havoc in the backfield. In the run game, they have a couple really solid players. They have a really good defensive tackle, and their leading tackler is actually Austin Moore, who actually grades out really well as a run defender as well. So they're just really solid across the board. They really don't have a weak spot that you can attack. Some of their guys in the secondary don't necessarily grade out that well, but it's better to have three pretty rock solid good guys and a couple guys than having what WVU has. And K-State really has a scheme that works out for them. Obviously, their defense has been lights out for the most part this year. And, they've really put the beat down on some pretty solid Big 12 teams. We just talked about Baylor, but they also beat Oklahoma State. What was it? 48-0 a few weeks ago. This is a team that if you just can't get it going, they have no problem piling on and keeping your head down in the dirt. So I'm not sure what WVU's answer is going to be. Is Garrett Greene going to be the answer? I don't know. And it'll be interesting to see what K-State comes up with to try to neutralize the potential threat of Garrett Greene coming into this game.
Yeah, and I hope Neal doesn't give up on Garrett early if he does get the nod, because like you said, K-State can, get up on you early and then it's hard to come back. I hope he doesn't get like 2 drives and then if they're not successful, we go right back to JT. And that's not to say I'm totally against JT getting back in there if it's just not working, but I hope Garrett at least gets a fair shake before, we break the emergency glass and go back to JT.
And I don't even think necessarily right now is the right time to go back to JT. I mean, as much as I still like JT and I would love to have him back next year and be the starter, there's just something going on with him. And, he's just not the same quarterback as we saw week 1. So even if Garrett can't get it going, I wouldn't mind seeing, Goose out there or, Nico, if you wanted to go that route. Just because, it's a good chance to see what you have. And, I think they all can kind of do different things. I think Nico kind of has shown that he's a gamer, which is something you really can't buy. I think Goose might be the best arm wise on the team. I think, arm strength, he just really, really can throw a nice ball. Garrett, obviously the most athletic. And I think, when you look at JT on paper, he's probably the most cerebral quarterback out there, really making good, quick decisions when he's on his game. But again, we don't know what it is because JT won't say anything, and Neal Brown seems to be oblivious to what's going on with JT. So, I just don't think it makes sense to trot him out there because even if JT says he can play, there's something going on with him, whether it's mental or physical, that is holding him back and is honestly hurting him. For someone who wanted to go pro after a year, you can't just put yourself out there and keep on making yourself look worse. Sometimes it's better just to call it quits and say, you know what, I got this going on. I can't finish the season, or have a coach do that. That's what leadership is.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, that's coaching because, I'm sure in JT's mind, he doesn't want to admit it because he's already got the label. So, but anyways, moving on to a couple more football notes before we go to basketball. Real quick, I wanted to talk about James Gmitter. I just thought about that. I don't even have it in my notes, but did you see he announced he officially retired from football due to his injuries? Great guy. I mean, he was a good football player when he was healthy. It's a shame that's the way his career ended. And then, of course, his mother suddenly passing away just a few weeks ago. Just really feel for the guy. I'm upset for him that that's the way his career ended, but definitely wanted to give James Gmitter a shout out because he was definitely a fan favorite. And I wish his career could have ended a different way.
Yeah, definitely. It's been a really rough few months for him. And, my thoughts are with him and his family just because that's, all that things rolled into one is tough. I read rumors. I don't know if there's any truth to it, but he's actually going to be joining police academy and
I heard
try to
that.
be like a police officer in Morgantown. So that'll be nice. But I don't know. That's just a Twitter rumor. Don't know if there's any weight to that, but just wanted to throw it out there in case that's the route he ends up going because, I don't know if I would want someone that big and nasty looking to walk up on me after I've spent the night on the town.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard that on Sportsline as well. So I'm sure those rumors are accurate and good for him. I'm glad he's got, a career path already lined up because as we know, sometimes athletes don't know what to do after sports. Seems like he's got a good head on his shoulders and obviously everyone's rooting for him. Seems like he's got good character and, people with good character typically come out stronger when they go through rough patches like this. So, hoping nothing but
Absolutely.
the best for James Committer. But to round out the football, we have two guys who actually announced just today that they are transferring. Mumu Ben Wahad and Corbin Page announced they'll be transferring from WVU. Page was a West Virginia boy. He was a true freshman this year. He played tight end, but he didn't see any playing time this year. I'm sure most fans aren't even real familiar with the name. Me and Brandon are because I remember talking about him on the podcast last year when he announced that he was coming to WVU. And I believe he played wide receiver in high school, but we knew that they were going to use him at tight end because he had a good build. I don't think anyone expected him to come here and light up the stat sheet, but we did like the potential of his size and his build to maybe make an impact. But sounds like it's not in the cards for Corbin Page. So what do you think about his announcement?
Yeah, I was really disappointed because he's someone who I really thought could have helped out this year, especially with I forget who transferred, TJ Banks transferring out, the uncertain health of Mike O'Laughlin. And we could have really used the additional help at tight end this year. I mean, we were playing with Brian Polanday and Traylon Davis. And outside of that, I mean, we've been looking for someone to do anything. And coming out of high school, it seemed like Corbin Page was someone who was a good blocker. I know he was recruited by other schools to actually move to offensive line because of his blocking skills. Obviously showed the soft hands playing wide receiver. I thought, he was someone who could have came in, but it seemed like he has not been with the program actually for several weeks, if not months, which is just really baffling. I heard that he came to camp underweight. He came in at like 210, which is way too light for a tight end. So I don't know what's going on with him. I was really excited for him because, not necessarily thinking that he was going to be like a Rob Gronkowski, but just having a tight end that we can put into the rotation. We badly needed it. And I thought the opportunity was there, but it just doesn't seem like it was made to be. I hope he can figure it out and end up somewhere that works out for him because I do think that he has the athletic abilities and the talents to be a really solid tight end in college football. So very disappointed that we couldn't keep him around, especially since he's a West Virginia kid, and wish him the best moving forward.
Yeah, like you said, he hasn't been with the team for a few weeks now, and I'm sure that's because he was just waiting for that transfer window to open up with the new rules. But yeah, you mentioned Polanday and Davis. They actually had really good games against Oklahoma, opening up lanes. So shout out to them. But they have had some rough patches. Yeah, we could have used an extra body out there at tight end. But yeah, you mentioned him being underweight. Chances are he's going to transfer out to a smaller school to get more playing time. So can't blame him there. You only get 4 years in college. You might as well go somewhere where you're going to get some playing
Mm-hmm.
time before your football career is over. But we also mentioned Mumu Ben Wahad, which was probably the bigger news. He's a true freshman defensive back, played in 4 games this year, just like we mentioned earlier. So that means he can still redshirt. And he's transferring out. I mean, this isn't like super disappointing news, but it's definitely more disappointing than Corbin Page because Mumu was a guy who was talked about after the spring game all off season, and we thought maybe he could actually be a starter here in Morgantown. And so, out of the two, this one is definitely the one that's most disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, coming out of high school, he was actually supposed to be the best in man coverage in our recruiting class. And it was just kind of strange how they handled him. I know they moved him to safety, which is kind of strange for someone who's more of a cover guy, instead of playing him at corner, which we really, really needed. I felt like there was a lot of opportunity, and we have said this numerous times throughout the last few podcasts, is, where are the young guys, especially when we have talent out there, how bad can they be? And we never really got a real good shot at Mumu. We saw a decent amount of Jacoby Spells. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with him. I'm hoping he sticks around because he's supposed to have a lot of talent as well, even though his freshman year didn't go so hot. But Mumu was another guy who, if you would talk to any diehard WVU fan about who their sleeper kind of best player in this recruiting class could be, a lot of people said Mumu bin Wanad. And, I'm not big on watching high school football tapes of, teenagers, but I'll take their word for it. So, disappointing just because it seemed like people who know what they're talking about liked him, but only time will tell to see how he's going to end up. So we needed bodies in the secondary. So that's why I'm kind of extremely disappointed, because I don't want to have to go dipping into, I don't know, some community college somewhere in the Midwest to pick up a new starting cornerback this offseason just to see if he's Charles Woods or Ajayi.
Yeah, I'm with you, and that's probably what they are going to have to do. They're going to have to go to the transfer portal to replace Mumu because, like you said, we need bodies in the secondary. Spells, I'm actually really excited for his future. Like you said, he had some rough patches, but I mean, he's a true freshman, and I think all that playing time he got this year is really, really going to help him down the road. And he definitely had some flashes of being a really good player as he gets older. So, yeah, I mean, it's nothing to really throw your arms up about, but I was a little disappointed when I saw that today. Switching gears a little bit, let's go to basketball to cap off this podcast. Friday, WVU defeated Pitt 81-56. The 25-point win was the biggest win over Pitt while in Pittsburgh ever for WVU. I heard Coach Hunter mention that on Sportsline. So credit to him for that info. But this was just a fun game to watch. We're only 2 games into this season, but this team is fun. They hustle, they play tough defense, and for once, this team actually can make shots. We hear that all the time. We heard that all last year, but this team seems to actually be able to really light it up. They shot 52%. So what are your thoughts on West Virginia basketball so far?
Yeah, I mean, I was worried at the beginning of the season about who the number one scorer would be. And while I do think we have someone who could potentially be a kind of go-to guy, what this game showed me is that we have, 4 or 5 complementary scorers, guys who can just, take turns taking baskets, aren't selfish, will move the ball, let other guys get opportunities. And I feel confident with that. And, that's great to have because you don't necessarily need one guy who can score 20. If you have 4 guys who can score 8 or 10, that's just as good sometimes because it makes it harder for the defense. And I think we have that. On top of that, we still have guys who are really good defenders, and we still have some big men who are really, really, tough to play against. I mean, obviously Bell and Wagee need to stay out of foul trouble, but we still have more bodies down there too that can log some minutes if we need to. Wagee was great. Obviously 5 for 5, 4 rebounds, but you want to see him stay out of foul trouble because I think that he is our most talented big man. But I think again, like I said, I think I said after the first game, I'm really excited for the future of Trey Mitchell. I think he's someone who, as he gets 100%, is going to be our best offensive player because he just makes it look effortless on offense. So I'm really excited for him as well.
I'm with you. Yeah, the biggest thing that stuck out to me, this team can score in transition and they can rebound, and that's 2 things that last year's team just really seemed to lack. But like you said, they're getting contributions from everybody. Wagee looked like the real deal. He could score inside. He can rebound. Stevenson looks like a bona fide shooter. Right now, he's shooting 61% on the season, and
Wow.
yeah, I know. I couldn't even believe that. Obviously, he can't keep up that pace, but He looks like a sure scorer so far. Toussaint not only looks like a lockdown guard, but he had a team high 18 points against Pitt. So that's good that he can also chip in with the points. Matthews
Five
had
assists.
another. What's that?
5 assists too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he just looks like a solid point guard. Matthews had another double-digit night. This team just has it. That's all I can say. They are a team. It's not like they're just leaning on Taz or Neal to score like last year's team. They're a whole team. They get scoring from all over. They don't have to rely on one or two guys. I just can't say enough about this team, and I'm trying not to get too excited because they beat two teams that, probably aren't going to end the season with winning records. But so far, I mean, this team just has the it factor.
Yeah. And I like that we're seeing all these veteran players play, and Huggins is still finding a way to get some of these younger guys minutes too. Kobe still had 18 minutes. Seth had 11. Okonkwo had 9. So it's not like these guys are getting pushed to the end of the bench just because we got all this new talent in. Huggins is still working his way in, and I think that there's gonna be times where you see him play more minutes. So I like that because we just have a lot of seniors this year, and it'll be great for developing the future to keep these young guys progressing.
I'm with you. Yeah, and just to give you a quick rundown of who's up next, West Virginia has Morehead State on Tuesday, Pennsylvania on Friday. And it's not like, these are scary opponents. Morehead State's 2-1. Penn is 0-3. However, they do need to take care of business because for WVU to have any chance of making the tournament this season, they need to make easy work of these early games, pad the resume a little bit. Plus, it's good to have these opponents early for West Virginia that they, should be able to beat because this is a team who, needs to work out the kinks, needs to learn how to mesh together, even though they look great those first two games. I'm glad we have these opponents to really get us ready for not only the Big 12. I think they have like Auburn and some other teams that you really need to be worried about coming up soon.
Yeah, Auburn is in January, but we do play
Oh, is it that
Purdue.
far out?
Yeah, we play Purdue though on the 24th, so 10 days out.
That's what I was thinking.
Xavier on the 3rd, and then just looking through the schedule, UAB, who was a tough team last year, on the 10th.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, I know, you see Morehead State on the schedule. You don't really get up for that. But like we said, those games are important, whether you know it or not, because that's going to help you win against some of those big games down the road.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think this is going to be a fun team to watch. I really hope that they can continue this going into Big 12 play because I do think that it seems like it's a team that Huggins likes to coach, and that can go a long way.
Yeah, I agree. He even looks like he's having fun out there sometimes with these games, which honestly, I can't think of one game last year where I thought, hey, Huggy Bear looks like he's having fun over there on the bench. But just to kind of round this off, I'm sure everyone saw it, but there was an NFL game in Germany over the weekend. I believe it was Tampa Bay versus the Seahawks. And very famously, it went viral. They broke out in singing Country Roads. And I've heard this for years. Germany loves the song Country Roads. I have no idea why. I love it though. I think that's such a cool moment, especially for guys like Geno Smith and Bruce Irvin who were there playing. And then all of a sudden you just hear, that song that probably brings back so many good memories for them. So, yeah, I just wanted to mention that. I thought that was really neat.
Yeah, that's very cool. I mean, we don't get to hear it enough here at WVU with Neal Brown as head coach. So I like hearing it. Someone else getting to sing it, enjoy it. So just had to end my thoughts with another jab at Neal Brown because he needs to be fired.
I heard someone say this. I don't know if it's true or not, but apparently Country Roads, of course, is an American song by John Denver, is the most popular American song of all time in Europe. I don't know if that's
Really?
true or not. I didn't do my research. But one funny thing to end this podcast is before we became the voice of Motown podcast, our first 3 episodes we ever did, me and Brandon called ourselves Q Country Roads Podcast, and we get our demographics. And one of the weird things was we had one listener from Germany in one of those first 3 episodes, and what we assumed was some guy in Germany was on Spotify or something looking for John Denver's Country Roads, and he got these 2 idiots talking about West Virginia. So when I saw that video going viral with Germany singing it, that's one of the first things I thought of. Like, oh hey, someone in that stands probably heard our podcast last year.
Too bad he wasn't a long time listener. We just sent him
Yeah,
a
that's
t-shirt or
right.
something.
Yeah, he
Even
bailed
though we
out.
don't have t-shirts.
All right, guys. Hey, thanks for listening. We'll record again next week. And as always, let's go Mountaineers.
Yeah, let's go. Thanks, everyone.